of the Caroline County Board of Supervisors to order. Our first item tonight is the election of chairman. And so we'll take nominations for chair for the 2021 calendar year.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Mr. Underwood.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to nominate Mr. Underwood for chair for 2021. Do we have any other nominations? He's trying, yeah.
Mr. Colley, I'd like to nominate Mr. Thomas.
Okay, but I also have a nomination for Mr. Thomas for chair
I'll second.
and a second. So we have two nominations. So I guess we will vote on the first. Ben, jump in here any you can, please. Make sure you're not muted. You're still muted, Ben.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What is the procedure? Should we follow just a vote on the first nomination, or?
I think, yes, I think I would vote on the first nomination and then on the second one.
Very good.
Mr. Colley, any discussion?
Any discussion on the nomination before we call for a vote on the first nomination?
I do. I have a concern, is that during the last election period, I think everyone on this podium has served as either vice chair or chair up until the last session. And we voted to have a member of the board serve a second term as chair, which I thought was unfair. And the comment was that the vice chair, in order to be the chairman, you had to serve as vice chair, which has never been a rule on this board until it was gerrymandered and came up as a rule for the last election. So I did not think it was fair. So I did not want to serve as vice chair then. I didn't have the time. I was just retiring, and I told it would be unfair to this board to sit in a chair, in a position, and not be able to give it the due diligence. So now that I retired, it's different color. But by the same token, if we're going to make a rule, then we should stick to the rule that we put in place. And it's clearly on tape that this board said that if you're going to be the chairman, you should serve as vice chair first. So I think this is some gerrymandering that I don't agree with, because I'm not going to be put in a position to be made a fool of by this board or anybody on this board. You can call around and you can get all the votes you want. The procedure is the procedure. If you put something in place, you should follow the procedure. Those are my comments, Mr. Colley.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding, and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Underwood. I think it's more of a tradition. I don't think it's actually written down, thinking that people should, it's good to serve as vice chair before chair, which is why I nominated you, because I think you're perfectly capable to be vice chair last year. And as you said, the time was not right for you at that time. Although you told me you didn't want it, I thought you had said you wanted to be chair. So, but I thought you would make a great chair then, or vice chair. Everybody on this board is perfectly capable of chairing a meeting. But I just wanted to correct, I don't think it's written in our bylaws that you have to do that. But I think it's a good practice, but it's not a bylaw.
Mr. Colley,
Yes, sir.
Correct me if I got a couple questions. First of all, like, I don't understand, I don't think anyone on this board has served 2 terms since I've been on here, in a row as chair or vice chair. I could be wrong.
You're wrong. Yeah, Mr. Thomas served 2 years when I first got here.
He served 2 years in a row.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was at the very,
Yeah, it was, I think, 13 and 14. Mr. Taylor then was made chair,
okay.
and Mr. Seeley had been vice chair, and Mr. Taylor was made
Right.
chair, and Mr. Seeley was not.
And during that time, okay, so I'm correct there. I think Mr. Seeley was vice chair at one time and then did not become chair, correct?
Correct. 14.
14, he was vice chair and then was not voted as chair.
Correct.
I also think, Mr. Underwood, last year you were offered to be vice chair by several members and did not accept it because you said you wanted to be chair. And so that to me is a double standard, because that would have made you go from not vice chair, you would have gone from sitting to chair.
No,
So,
everyone,
I mean,
everyone
the-
had served,
the-
Mr. Black.
The
Everyone
point
had served in
is
in that
that
position.
was following tradition. so you
that's the
turned
case.
down-
So don't change now then. If you follow it then leave it, don't change it now. That's all I'm saying. I don't have an issue with you following the process, just follow the same process. I didn't say that was you guys said that was the process. And I said, fine. Then follow the process. That's all I'm saying. Not that I don't want to be chair. If I'm voting, I'll be glad to serve, but that's not the issue. The issue is that we had a process in place. We said we're going to follow it, and we don't change horses
I'll
in
call the question.
the middle of the stream.
I call the question.
I haven't had a chance to comment yet.
Yeah,
It's my 5th year. I don't recall ever having a policy rule agreement vote on anything
No.
like that. I understand Mr. Underwood's comments, but just saying that from my perspective, it's really don't care. Anyone like this Long said, anyone on the board
Absolutely.
is capable of serving in either capacity, and I wouldn't have felt comfortable in my first couple of years serving in either capacity, and I've stayed away from that. Any suggestion of that, but we're not in that situation with anybody.
Then all I say, Mr. Moran, then don't put it on the table as an issue. And I agree, any one of the 6 of us should be able to serve in any capacity. Then it shouldn't be brought up on the table as an issue or a process if all of a sudden we abate the process. I'm just saying, just be fair. Keep it the same. Do what unless there's some obvious reason as to why we shouldn't, then we all understand the rules of the game. Let's level the playing field is all I'm saying. And I don't think the playing field's level. I don't have an issue with what you're saying now. Sure. But it wasn't what you said. And go back to the tape from last year. Go back and look at the tape.
There won't be anything that came from my lips resembling anything like
I
that.
believe
So
there was.
I can assure you. Because
Don't-
honestly, I'm okay with having one person serve as chairman for 4 years in a row.
I am too sometimes.
And,
I voted that way.
I'm okay with it being a different person every year, and I'm okay with it being 2 and 2, and then person goes from
Exactly.
non-chair to non-vice chair to chair. It's
Then we shouldn't bring up arbitrary rules that fit a situation. I'm just saying,
I called the
I don't have
question.
any issue with that.
I called the question a while ago, so.
any further discussion real quick? Not hearing any. All in favor of Mr. Underwood to be chair for the 2020, for the 21 calendar year? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? All right, well, that's 4-2. Do you need a roll call? Mr. Forehand? Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Underwood?
I'm saying,
Mr. Seeley?
I'll vote aye.
Mrs. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas? 3-2 with an abstention. Now, Ben, do we move to the next one?
No, I don't think you do because
You've got an affirmative vote on the
you've
first one.
already got a yes.
But that's not.
yeah, I'll say.
I mean, because we're all sort of.
Well,
Very good. So Mr. Underwood's chair, and I would ask, would you like to finish with all of the board's processes?
Will, Mr. Cully?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, board members. Next on the meeting agenda is the election of vice president for the 21, 22 Caroline County Board of Supervisors. Floor is open now for nomination.
I'll nominate Mr. Jeff Black.
Second.
There's been a nomination of Mr. Black for vice chair and a second. Any other nomination? Hearing none, nominations are closed. We'll call for the vote. Mr. Forehand? Mr. Forehand's an aye. Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Black is an aye. I'll vote aye as well. Mr. Sealy?
I vote aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Long? Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas votes aye. Mr. Black, you're voted in as vice president with a 6-0 vote. Next on the agenda is Board of Supervisor appointments. We have a number of, first of all, many of us are serving on committees at this time.
Of rules.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did pass. I
It
did
doesn't
miss that.
matter.
Right. Now we need to adopt Rob rules of orders. We all have been given the bylaws for the 21 bylaws for the Board of Supervisors. Any changes, any comments, any discussion?
I make a motion to adopt the board bylaws as presented.
There's been a motion to approve the bylaws for the 21 Caroline County Board of Supervisors for rules and procedures. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Forehand. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it by a vote of 6-0. We have adopted the approved bylaws for the 21 Board of Supervisors meetings. Next, we'll go to Board of Supervisor appointments. We got a number. I don't have the, can I get,
The list is,
Pam, do you have a list? Do you have a board packet? It's not listed in the, here, thanks, Jeff.
Mr.
First,
I was just going to say, Mr. Underwood, if there's no objection, right now I am serving on too many committees and I wanted to thin down a little bit. So I'd like to give up GWRC and VAMPO. I am willing to serve on the Social Services Board and to continue with the Rappahannock River Basin Commission and the Executive Steering Committee if that helps. But I just, sure, sure.
Board of Supervisors liaison for the Rappahannock River. Anyone like to serve on that? On that last 8 years, I can
can you just go through them and we'll make changes and then we'll adopt them at the end? That way it's one motion.
sounds good. Mr. Sealy, serve on the Social Services Board.
I'd like to swap with Mrs. Long. She has expressed interest in that.
Mrs. Long, you okay with that?
Yes, please.
Okay. On the Georgia Washington Regional Commission, Mr. Black and Ms. Long.
And I'm going to
Okay.
switch with Mrs. Long on that.
Gotcha. On the Fredericksburg Government and Military Affairs Council, Mr. Sealy.
I'll continue, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Sealy. Anybody else have any interest? The Rappahannock Regional Disability Services Board, Mr. Cully, you're our representative. Going to continue? Of course. Thank you, Mr. Cully. No, I don't think you have any choice. The Rappahannock River Basin Commission, Ms. Long,
I'll
going to continue? Mr. Forehand, you're on the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance. You want to continue there, or you want?
If anybody else would like to do it, then I will open that up. If not, I'll continue to serve.
Is there any board member that would like to serve on the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance? All right, Mr. Forehand, we'd ask you to continue. Okay. The Recreation Advisory Committee, Mr. Forehand, you're still. We talked about that.
It was a very easy year. We really didn't meet because of the situation.
Right.
But again, if another board member would like to do it, that's fine. If not, I'll continue to serve.
Well, let's go, since it was a crazy year, we didn't do a lot of, let's continue. Should have been too cumbersome. And then Ms. Long, you're going to continue to serve on the AP Hill Executive Steering Committee.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to appoint those board members to those agencies, moving Mr. Sealy to the Georgia Washington Regional Commission and moving Ms. Long to the Social Services Board liaison?
I'll make the motion, we adopt as presented.
Second.
Motion has been properly presented and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Six
going
to
back
none. Yes, sir.
to the previous, on our regular meeting schedule, I want to just point out an error. In our November meeting, it's in bold. That was normally would be Tuesday, November 16th. However, it should be Thursday, November 18th instead.
It's always after the VACO meeting.
The next week instead. Okay. All right, that is correct.
That is-
All
that
right.
is
So we were thinking there was a conflict, that it was just, okay. My apologies. Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Is there any other business for the organization? Then we move to close that.
I'll make a motion, we close the organizational meeting.
Second.
And the motion is proper second. January 12th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Ms. Long. All right. The motion passes. We will now close the organizational meeting for the 2021 Board of Supervisors meeting.
Open up.
Yeah, I'll close it. We'll close that one. Right, right. So now I'd like to call the Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting to order for the January 12th, 2021. I'd like to start off with an invocation by Mr. Black, if you would do the honors, please.
Everyone, please stand. Heavenly Father, as we come before you tonight, we ask you to pray. We ask you to pray for our country through these difficult times. We ask you to put in our hearts for reunification. In your name, we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
At this time, I'd just like to go through and identify all the members who are present. All board members are present. To my far right, Mr. Clay Forehand representing Madison District. To my right, Mr. Jeff Black representing the Western Carolina District. To my left, Mr. Jeff Seeley representing the Bowling Green District. To his left, Ms. Nancy Long from Fort Road District. And to the far left, Mr. Floyd Thomas representing the Mattapan District. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting for opening board comments. Mr. Forehand.
None at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Black.
I have a few. First of all, right around Thanksgiving, first of all, Happy New Year, everyone. Around Christmas time, we had a horrible event in this county. It was all over the news about what happened. I do, however, want to put a huge thank you to the sheriff's office. I think the whole issue was solved within 24 to 48 hours of the event. And so they did an outstanding job involved in that terrible situation that struck the county. So Major Mosier, thank you guys for what you guys did. It says a lot. The second thing I do want to talk about a little bit. It's the events of last Wednesday were extremely unfortunate, and it's one of those events. I think that as a teacher, you just as an American, you're just going to remember where you are when you were watching that and hearing the news, whether it be September 11th or. And I'm glad Dr. Calveric is here because I hope as Americans that we can discuss this openly from different lenses and perspectives. I will say for myself personally, the day after that happened with my students in my AP U.S. History class in Spotsylvania, I had an unbelievable discussion with the kids from different lenses, different aspects of life, how they view things. It was very cordial and very eye-opening, and they got to voice their opinions. And I think sometimes the school systems, we squelch that because we're afraid of controversy. And I think that we need to let these kids express what they believe because they're living it. And sometimes I think school systems can put rules in place that handcuff teachers to have open dialogue about some of the hard discussions that we need to have as a society. So Dr. Calveric, I hope that there is open dialogue that is taking place about that and that the teachers are not being persuaded to on a gag rule on it. So thank you. The other thing I would like to discuss is, and I don't know if our board really is aware of this sometimes, but last week there was quite a fire in Lake Landor. And the fire department, I want to say, they did an outstanding job. So first of all, their response was incredible. However, I think we need to have a discussion at the board level on some of these calls. What exactly could possibly go wrong? What are the weaknesses in our system? And it's no blame whatsoever on, we have excellent firefighters, but I think sometimes we don't understand how close we could be to disaster in some of our communities. And that is I think when we talk about public safety, I think that is a discussion, open discussion that we need to have. Because it's better to talk about it now than say, when people come to you, how could this happen? And I think that's a discussion we really need to have. And finally, at some point, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to, there is a potential, Mr. Seeley had worked hard on a potential project, and I think for internet, and I know Mr. Thomas had worked hard on that too. I think we need to have an open dialogue about that at a board meeting. So I look forward to seeing that sometime on a board agenda. Yeah, public forum. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have fairly lengthy comments, so I'll just give it to you up front. I would like to look back over the past few months in amongst the COVID situation we've all been mired down on and talk about the folks, at least in my district, the residents and the businesses that have pulled together. I'm going to start with Halloween. Halloween was going to be an iffy situation, and I had a resident, Rebecca Sullivan, who came up with a delivery method for actually handing out Halloween candy through a shoe. And not only did she develop that, but she put it out on one of the local sites so everybody could see it. She then gathered all the addresses for people that would do Safe Halloween and made a map so that everybody could see who was participating in the Safe Halloween practice. And then she went on to invite anybody that wanted to come, and we had a tremendous Halloween turnout in Bowling Green. I think it was Halloween Central this year because there were so few places that could actually have trick or treat because of the COVID situation and all the close proximity that everybody came. But I will tell you that started off a very interesting season in Bowling Green, because then we moved getting towards Christmas, and there's a group with the Main Street program, and every year we do a Christmas tree in front of Pitts and Mans. And Whispering Pines, just outside of Bowling Green, always donates the tree. And once again, the Main Street program came through with coming together. All of us came together to put up the tree. Instead of a chorus singing the music, we actually had it all pre-recorded and played it on a PA system. And everybody that came, and I will tell you that we probably had at least 100 people who very responsibly social distanced across the street and down the street to watch the lighting of the tree. And I think it really brought people together to be able to start to at least look at something that was normal. Then the Main Street program moved into a lighting contest in Bowling Green. The businesses and the residences that signed up to actually display and decorate their house was phenomenal. And the lighting that we actually had take place, and I think it spread to even outside town because we saw it in other places around the county as you were driving around. But people looked and drove through town and I think truly enjoyed all the lights that were actually along Main Street and on the side streets. We had a good bit of traffic that drove around and actually looked at all those. The other interesting thing in Bowling Green is we've had 2 new businesses open in the midst of the pandemic. The Corner Store, which is a new eatery that does lunch. Anybody that's in Bowling Green during lunch, I really recommend you stopping there. And the Painted Horse, which has a variety of things. It has art, it has furniture, it has arrangements, it has gifts. They're doing things by appointment and by mail. But we have seen it's interesting to see an uptick, new starts in a situation that, as we look around the country, has been very difficult. The Painted Horse is also running a child's art show, and it's called Through the Eyes of a Child. You can walk by on the outside and take a look at it. I would encourage anybody that's got some time. Not only is it walkable, it's good exercise, which we all need because we're all sitting around probably way too much, but it'll give you an opportunity to actually look at some children's art. And I've got to commend the restaurants in and around town and their ability to adapt and change with carry out, eating on the street, delivery in some cases. I will tell you that has really been a real boon to those businesses and to the folks that live around town. And I've heard from one group that community support plus personal responsibility equals success. And I think that's truly what we're seeing in and around Bowling Green. And to top that off, for those that were probably inhibited by traffic, and I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for their work with the movie crew that filmed yesterday. It was a Hulu movie that was filmed on the corner of Main and Milford Street. They shot all day yesterday. They used a lot of facilities in town. They ate, they bought a lot of stuff at the hardware store. The actors and actresses walked around town and met people. I think there was nothing but excitement about all of that as that took place. And I don't want to forget that we are now looking for a new Sparta Fire Station site. That process is moving. We're looking for a new location for that. Hopefully in the next few months, we will have that and be able to move forward. But last, I also want to comment on last Wednesday. I have written to our elected U.S. officials to decry the violence inside of the Capitol. That they should do whatever it takes to start the healing and move forward to ensure this doesn't happen again. And I can't say that any stronger, but that is not something that needs to take place and should not have taken place. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Happy New Year, everyone. 2021, I don't think anybody is sad to see 2020 go, and we welcome 2021. But with the increase in the rise of COVID, please encourage everybody to continue practicing your safety methods and to be mindful of the safety protocols that we've established. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for others. We have the encouragement of the vaccine coming down, but it's going to take time. So be patient, hang in there, and let us all just keep the faith that 2021 is going to end on a brighter Christmas note, New Year note than this past year has. I want to also recognize all our staff, county employees, for the adjustment, the way they have worked with all the protocols and all the stress that they've been under this year, from juggling funds we didn't expect to setting up temperature stations and getting supplies in and out to all the people that are needed. Please continue to keep our first responders in your hearts and in your minds as they deal with the increase of calls and with some of the both medical and emotional breakdowns that are going on around this county and the nation. So that's all on that point. I did want to make sure to express my thanks to Mr. Seeley and to Mr. Thomas for their leadership last year, running our meetings and keeping us on a level platform despite all the COVID challenges. And I look forward to working with everybody in the upcoming years. We work together to continue to guide this county into the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple to go again on the COVID and the response. I've been in touch with the local health department to try to get our fire and rescue folks vaccinated quicker. I think they should have been done this week. Also trying to get the law enforcement folks higher on the schedule. And I understand schools are going to be done separately so they could all be done together and get kids back in school. Hopefully the county and the schools can work together to make that happen. Last but not least, I just heard the federal government is changing the requirements, so I'm not sure if we'll go to 1B being 65 and older or not, because we're right now at 75, so I guess we've got to get some sort of direction from the governor, but let's hope we can get as many people vaccinated as possible. I'd volunteer to do it myself in public to make folks feel a little better if that would help. So whenever my turn comes, I'll be happy to do that. With respect to what happened in DC last week, to take a step back, I wrote a Facebook post and a fairly long article after George Floyd was killed, which I stated several times that I believe in the First Amendment, all 10 of the first ones, but the right to protest and the right to make your voice heard before government. And doesn't matter what party you belong to, you have the right to peacefully protest. At that time, I said violence was wrong when it related to George Floyd. the violence that took place last Wednesday was something America hadn't seen in over 200 years when the British stormed the Capitol. I said that was unacceptable last week, and I still believe it's unacceptable. I hope that will not happen again, and we can all move forward from there. I will congratulate Mr. Underwood on being elected to chair. I do have some other comments for that, but we'll discuss those at a later time. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. My comment, or comment is that anytime you're sworn to, and you take the oath to do a job, I think we owe it to everyone to do it the best that we can, be it any elected official, anyone sworn to protect and serve. We stand and we pledge allegiance to the flag, but do we really listen to the words of the Pledge of Allegiance? The flag has to stand for something. And it can not only mean something when you're on the winning side. The Constitution stands there and is written for a reason. Does not always mean that things are equal and that we are working toward a more perfect union. But we know that humans have many flaws. This was a very tragic situation last Wednesday, but it's been going on for a long time. And we have to be able to stand up for right, no matter where it is, when it is, or how it is. You cannot say something's wrong when the party that we disagree with is doing it, or it doesn't look right. Let's call it for what it is. Wrong is wrong. And if we're going to be better, we're going to have to learn to work together. Even our differences, we have different ideologies, different views, does not mean that we can't work for a better outcome. Just means we have a different view of how to get there. But it takes work. It takes the ability sometimes to fuss, sometimes to cuss, but it doesn't mean that you're not working together. But violence is never the answer. Insurrection is never the answer. And finally, I do want to thank all of our staff members for the hard work they've put in over the last year through this COVID. I think they've done a remarkable job. I think that, again, together, this county will learn to be better because of COVID, because it causes us to have dialogue. So let's continue to work together. Let's make this county, this Commonwealth, this nation a better place to live. With that, I'll close board comments. Next on the agenda is amendments to the agenda. Any amendments?
I make a motion, we adopt the agenda as presented, Mr. Chairman.
There's a motion that we adopt the agenda as is. Can I get a second?
Second.
Motion to adopt the agenda has been properly moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, preview and report. First on the agenda is recognition sponsored by Supervisor Jeff Black.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone. This actually comes from Ms. Holmes, who's
You're gonna have to get on that mic or nobody's gonna be able to hear you.
okay. I want to. Can you guys hear me now? Okay, sorry. This is actually brought together by Ms. Holmes, who represents JACADA, which stands for the Museum of Jazz and African American History. Ms. Holmes has put up on numerous occasions in Lakeland, or some of her artifacts. You guys can hear me? Some of her artifacts, so forth. So she did have something for the Board of Supervisors. We could not, she just says in her note, Board of Supervisors member, we could not have done this without you. Thank you for serving. Thank you for serving again. All right, and then it's in September. And Ms. Holmes, I'm sorry that she had this actually ready for us earlier, and I completely forgot about it at the last meeting. So then she does have a couple presentations that she wanted me to read. The first one is actually for Major Mosier. Major Mosier in the background, and she wanted me to read this. It says, Major Mosier, Caroline Sheriff's Department, thank you for being a sound voice in the midst of family tragedy and handling such emergencies with compassion and integrity, and for applying courage and thoughtful consideration while providing meaningful service to all the citizens of Caroline County. Thank you for making a positive difference in our community. And it's signed the members of Jakarta. So Major Mosier, I have this certificate for you. Do you want him to come down right now, or we'll just give it to him at break, or Ms. Holmes? Mr. Major Mosier.
Major Moji, come on down.
No crutches.
Ms. Holmes, do you want to come up with him to get a picture with Mr. Major Mosier? All right.
You can go up here.
Yeah, I guess they can go ahead.
Want to read them all?
No, really?
But I will.
All right. No, she asked me to, so just.
Smells like black.
Okay, I do have, Mr. Chair, I do have two more that they would like to present. So I should have probably done this all at once, but Miss, it says the St. John Giveaway Committee. This is for the St. John Giveaway Committee. Thank you for getting thank you for getting the community through COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. Your leadership abilities provide outstanding guidance. You exhibit excellent communication and organizational efforts. If anyone deserves a standing ovation today, is each one of you. During these uncertain times, your distribution of goods and prayer are timely and appreciated. Because of the collection of golf clubs, baby furniture, books, clothing, school supplies, and more, the needs of families in Caroline have been met, and you are life-changing. Thank you for making a positive difference in the community. Signed, Kaylee Holmes. And I have one more that I have to read, which is for the Domino's Pizza Store 609. So Jennifer Shoemaker, General Manager, for outstanding service as a member of staff employed at Domino's Pizza Store 6109. You are being recognized for providing excellent service by feeding all of the nurses and all the patients at the polytrauma unit and PTRP program during the COVID-19 pandemic. Your heart, spirit, and exceptional work ethic is awesome. We celebrate and thank you for getting us through COVID-19. Awarded this 26th day of September 2020. So if everyone else, I do have certificates, by the way, Mr. Cully, for a lot of the first responders from the different stations, so I'll just give those to you. But if the people that are here for those would come down for one more picture, that would be great. Gail, yeah, from St. John's. Someone from St. John's here. Yeah, come on down. Sorry to put you through this again. What's that? Okay. Yeah, down at the podium then. All right. Yeah. All right. Is anyone here from Domino's Pizza? Mr. Cully, I have the. Wow.
Am I going to get all? This is the St. John's. All right, who's going to do it?
Probably cooking.
That would help.
Okay.
We'll stand like that. I guess where's Jeff?
He's coming. Wow.
Okay, wonderful. I think he's in honor of Domino's. St. John.
St. John.
Thank you.
Oh, wow.
These folks aren't here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Black. We'll move on with the agenda to presentations of the fiscal year 2019-20 audit by Robinson, Farmer, and Cox.
I'm up. Hello. Good evening. I'm Ann Wall. Can y'all hear me? Yes. At some point, I have a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to pull up here very shortly, but I might have a couple of introductory remarks first. It's my pleasure to be here this evening. 2020 has been a challenging year for auditors, for local governments, for me personally and professionally. And so I'm pleased to really be here and be presenting your FY21 audit at your FY20 audit at your first meeting here in January 2021. Work dates this year, we were able, even with the pandemic, we were able to get out there the middle of June. We were there June 22nd through the 24th. And we did the final field work October 19th through 24th. Are you hearing the echo?
No.
No, okay, it's just me. Good. I think you all, the board probably has a hard copy of the audit report. It's a comprehensive document. It's 195 pages this year. It never seems to get any shorter. There's a lot of disclosures, again, related to the pension and OPEB plans, and those are probably take 30, 40 pages of some of those footnote disclosures. I'm pleased to report to you that staff assisted greatly in the preparation of the audit, to include the transmittal letter, which is at the front of the report. There's something called the management's discussion and analysis, which is a required element of the report, which has a lot of analytical comparisons of this year's activity to that last year. There's statistical tables at the back that were also prepared by in-house by staff. All right, I'm going to try to start my PowerPoint. All right, are we up? Yes, okay, very good. All right. kind of just going to go through the engagement summary, the overview of the presentation. We're just going to talk a little bit about what you hired us to do and then the results of the audit, some other reporting requirements. We did issue a management letter this year. I'm going to briefly go through that and then talk a little bit about fund balance. I only have about 9 slides, so it shouldn't take too long. Engagement summary. Local governments are required to have an annual audit conducted each year. So you hired Robinson Farmer Cox to perform your financial statement audit and issue a compliance report for the year. Local government audits are subject to a lot of regulation. The audit was based on auditing standards generally accepted in the United States, the audit specifications that are issued by the Auditor of Public Accounts for counties, cities, and towns, the standards for financial audits that are contained in government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General, the Single Audit Amendment, and the provisions of the Uniform Guidance. And all of those different requirements really drive the work that we do when we're in the field, the inquiries we make, and actually they affect the presentation of the report that you have in front of you. I'm very pleased to report that we were able to express an unmodified opinion on each of the following. Just as a recap, an unmodified opinion in accounting language is as good as it gets. It's the best opinion. It's a clean opinion. There were no modifications for any reasons. So there's 3 opinions or reports from your auditors that are included in your county's report. The first one is on pages 1 through 3. And that's on the unmodified opinion on the financial statement presentation. And that was based on the substantive work that we do. That's based on looking at your bank reconciliations and your accounts receivable and your payables and reconciling your taxes and make sure that the numbers that you're looking at properly reflect what the supporting and subsidiary ledgers reflect. We did propose a few adjusting entries, and they have been posted to the county's accounting system. So the accounting system mirrors the numbers that are reported in the fund financial statements that you have in front of you. In addition, there's 2 other reports or opinions that we're required to issue, and those are towards the back of the report in the compliance section. On pages 188 and 189 is our opinion on the compliance with each major program and internal control. Those are related to the federal program dollars that the county receives. If you expend over $750,000 in a single year, you're required to get something called a single audit. And there's a risk-based approach, and there's certain larger federal programs that we have to test each year. This year it was Title I, the school food program, which it makes sense. The schools get most of the federal program dollars. The Medicaid program and the firefighters grant that the county received this year were all subject to compliance testing. And there's very specific guidelines that we have to test related to those programs. And those all were, the results of those were clean. The third opinion that we issue has to do with the internal control over financial reporting and compliance. And that's the one that I think you should be the most proud of. For that opinion was also clean. And for those of you that remember, the last 3 years, the county has received a material weakness over financial reporting that was reported in that internal control opinion. This year, it was a clean report. We did not have to propose any adjusting entries that were material. All the ones that we proposed were not material. The finance department agreed they needed to be posted, and they were posted to the accounting system, but we didn't have to propose any material entries. So we did not have to report a material weakness over financial reporting. In addition, part of the engagement, we have to do some test work on the Virginia retirement system attestation, and that was a clean report as well. The county's financial report also has to be submitted to the Auditor of Public Accounts each year, along with some comparative cost report forms. Those have historically been due November 30th, but the General Assembly amended the deadline to December 15th last year at the 2020 General Assembly session. It really had nothing to do with the pandemic. The extension of the deadline, and it's permanent. So December 15th is now the new November 30th. But I'm pleased to report that your report got into the state on time. Your actual audit report is dated November 27th, but all the forms were filed with the Auditor of Public Accounts by the statutory deadline of December 15th. Once this presentation is complete tonight, the state also requires that localities submit a notarized statement from the chief elected official and the chief administrative officer, submit it to the Auditor of Public Accounts to say that the audit has been presented to the governing body. In addition, this report has to be presented to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and I'm currently working with the Director of Finance to get that submitted. It's not due until the final deadline is March 31st, so that submission will be taken care of by then. And then this report was also submitted to the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. Your landfill financial assurance was due December 31st, and I'm pleased to report that that got to them on time. We did issue a management letter. Items in a management letter are, they're different than what would be in the audit report. They're not material weaknesses. They're not significant deficiencies. They're just really other matters that will strengthen internal controls. We did review these comments with the Director of Finance and the accounting manager during our exit meeting at the conclusion of the audit. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time going through these comments, but again, they're not material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. They're just areas where some improvements could be noted. And we'll follow up on these matters when we come back for the next audit. We'll follow up on these very specific items. And I just want to take a moment. I generally never do this, but I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and perhaps compliment the contributions of the county's new finance director, Ms. Tamika Smith. She worked, I had not met her until I began to work with her in final field work. And she worked diligently and with purpose to prepare for the county's audit and with facing the deadline in front of her. I know she didn't, I'm not sure when she began employment with the county, but I know it was after the end of the fiscal year. I think she started sometime after June 30th. And she utilized the resources that were available to her, including her own technical abilities and competencies, but also the resources that the county had in place already, a strong accounting manager, and then Beth Curran, the treasurer, who's been a dedicated and very accomplished member of the finance team. But those three individuals worked together and got it done this year and got it done in time. And so that's a big year of achievement. Actually, I didn't talk about that last slide. This slide is just, I think I've done this for the last couple of years. This is excerpted from Exhibit 5 in the audit report. It's pages 20 and 21. And it's really just the fund balance. It's just a summary of the fund balances of your governmental funds and your enterprise fund. And really where you were this time last year. That first row is your fund balance at the beginning of the year. And then at June 30, the third line is your fund balance at June 30, 2020. So the county's general fund, you can see, declined by $1.7 million. The fund balance, ending fund balance, was a little over $23 million. But when you go back and look at the county's original budget for FY20, you'd actually budgeted a use of fund balance of $2.4 million. So at the end of the day, you ended up using less of the fund balance than had been budgeted. So that's positive. Other financial reporting information, if I really were just to draw your attention to any exhibits or reports, Exhibit 11 on page 100, it's the actual versus budget details for the general fund. And it's just the general fund. And so I think that's kind of interesting to look at that and see it has the beginning original budget and then the appropriated budget. And you can see where the county's revenues came in over budget and expenditures came in under budget, which was positive for the year. And then in the statistical tables, if I were to draw your attention just to one, that table 10 on page 182, it details the county's tax collections over the last 10 years. And the third column there, the county consistently has collected 95% of the tax levy in the year that it's billed. And that's a strong collection percentage. And then when you add the delinquent tax collections and compare that to the levy, you're looking at 98% of the levy collected. So those are strong numbers. The only other things I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the CARES Act money, and I know the board and the county administrators spent a lot of time in establishing, trying to follow the guidelines and get the funds expended. For the CARES Act, there was a new fund that was established in FY20 as a special revenue fund, and it's reporting the unspent CARES Act money at June 30. Most of it was unspent. So there's a deferred revenue item. It's sitting in cash, $2.4 million, and then as a deferred revenue item. And then I know the county received an additional round 2 of the money in August. So those CARES Act funds are federal funds, and they will be audited as a type A major federal program in FY21. And then my only other comment has to do with there's a new footnote, note 22 in the audit that discusses subsequent events and the COVID-19, specifically the pandemic, economic uncertainties, and the CARES Act funding received by the county. There's just some information in that footnote relative to where you are on that. That really concludes my comments unless anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you for your presentation. Board members, you have any comments or questions at this time? I know we haven't had an opportunity. I spent about 5 hours going through some of it, but it's quite lengthy. I made some highlights. Mr. Thomas?
The fund balance spreadsheet the slides you made, is that in
Yes,
our
sir.
packet, or that's something you did separately? I didn't see that.
If you go to Exhibit 5 on pages 20, 21 of the actual audit report, you can see it. I don't know if my PowerPoint, I don't think it got in the agenda package.
Oh, okay, no. We don't have that? We don't have that. We don't have that. I'd like a copy of that, please.
Ms. Wall,
Okay, sure.
Mr. Cullen, is it possible we could get a copy of that slide?
Yes, we'll get you, Ms. Tamika said she's got a copy of that, and we'll get it out to the whole board.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
Email, please.
Yes, sir, yeah, we'll email it.
Thank you.
Mr. Seeley?
I have one question, and I believe this is a typo on page 9.
Okay.
And it talks about other local taxes increased from 10.3% to 8.7%.
That does seem like a typographical error. I would have to take a closer look at that. This section of the report is the management's discussion and analysis, which is prepared in-house, but I did review it as well. So I'm not sure if the numbers are flip-flopped or what.
And also in that same paragraph, so we did have a decrease of revenue from 55 million to 52 million in general property taxes. Is that, am I looking at that right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is that all revenues or just property tax?
Well, the way it reads is it's just property taxes.
It says revenue, it doesn't. It just says general fund revenue.
Okay.
It's the last paragraph on page 9.
I think that is all the revenues, and then it was focusing on the general property taxes, since that's obviously the biggest component of the county's revenues.
Is the question what percent has come?
No,
from
just if it's property taxes, it went down $3 million.
That was my point.
It's like,
But I think it's all, if
all
you're
revenue.
right, it's all, if what she's telling us, it's all revenue, but the majority of our revenue is property tax, then is it a property tax or is it other things? Because this is as of 30 June, which is kind of what I'm bringing attention to.
Right.
Mr. Cully, is it possible to get a breakdown of the loss of revenue in categories?
I don't expect this tonight. It was
Yeah,
just
not
something I
tonight,
caught in the reading, and I
Yeah,
just,
yeah, we can, and, we'll prepare that for you and send it out, but remember,
That's
you
fine.
extended taxes to the end of June. And so it's
it
probably
may
some
not
of
be
it
a
moved.
complete loss.
Correct.
And I'm just looking for, because it's $3 million, it's a decrease. And I'm just looking at, if it's deferred, that's fine. I'm just looking at for the loss, that's all.
Correct, I understand. Because
Okay.
most of our things that were hit by the pandemic were made up by, sales tax. Yeah, so the things that went down, like meals tax revenue and lodging and things, they were offset by an increase in sales tax throughout that whole last quarter.
But can we just look at what this,
Oh, we will.
and that's fine.
We will.
I'm not looking for this tonight. It's just what we're talking about.
I think we'll be able to give you that tomorrow.
And
Thank
the
you, Mr.
one other one is the major capital improvements. It says we spent $333,600 for acquisition of land and a building at Fall Level Rescue Squad. Did we spend $330,000 at Frog Level on a rescue squad?
I'm going to have to defer to someone at the county. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
No, I understand it. Mr. Cully, I don't need an answer tonight. This just may be a numbers thing.
I was under the impression it was given to the county.
Huh?
I was under the impression it was given to the county, and there was a grant to take.
It was given to us, but we had to put it on the books as a fixed asset with the value that was on it. We didn't expend any money, but it had to get on the books and go on as zero.
Right.
I think we put it on at the assessed value of that property.
Correct.
Mr. Cully. Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what that's showing.
Question. Thank you, Mr. Cully.
Well, before you go, Mr. Cully, are you saying, before you sit down, sorry, are you saying it went in as an asset of $300-some thousand? When we get rid of it, it'll go out as an asset of 300
Or what you get rid of it for.
So we'll have a net loss on the property?
You could, but it had to go in based on what it was assessed at on the tax exempt book. So there's a real estate book of taxable and tax exempt. So the tax exempt value from the last reassessment, not the current one, the last reassessment had it valued at that value.
So even though the county got it for free, is going to dispose of it for some small fee that we're going to get, it's going to be a net loss.
It could be if we don't get more than, what we,
We're not going to get through it.
well, I doubt it, but yeah.
The last thing, is it possible that you could tell us, since the fund balance went down, what areas were overspent at some later point in time?
There was a few departments that were overspent, but overall we were underspent. We budgeted the budget on 2.4 million. So if everybody spent every penny we gave them and we collected 100% of the revenue, we would have needed 2.4 million and change to balance. So that we only spent 1.7 means we actually came in under budget. So our revenues were strong and our expenditures were down. Overall, we did have a few departments that were over one. I think it's $30,000, but that was probably a budgeting error as much as some of that as well. But yeah, so overall, if we'd have been zero, if everybody spent 100%, we would have taken 2.4, I think it's 2.45 million out of the fund balance. Now for 21, the budget's balanced with no funds from the fund balance. So we should still have a strong fund balance going in. I kind of knew with last year's budget before the pandemic, with the 20 budget, that there was a good chance we would take some money from the fund balance.
Any other questions from board members? We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any? Oh, I told her. Is she still there? Oh, thank you, Ms. Wall. Well, I guess she can't.
Can she hear us, David?
David, is she?
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items anyone wants to discuss on the consent agenda items A through E? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
There's been a motion to approve consent agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Consent agenda has been moved and properly second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried 6-0. All right, we can't get to the public comment till 7:30, so are there any?
I don't know that there's. You may as well take a real-time break since it's almost quarter. Mr. Colley's got it.
Do you think we have Mary Jones on Zoom for the health insurance unfinished business, the questions from the last meeting, if you think you can deal with that in 10 minutes, but
I think we can.
can you get her up?
Is she up?
You just gotta find her. There she sits.
That's agenda item number 6. All right, we're going to move to agenda item number 6, a continued discussion regarding the approval of an employee medical and dental insurance renewal for year 21-22. And I think, Mr. Thomas, you had some questions about it at the last meeting, I believe.
I think Mr. Parton, if he's there, was the one who was going to address those as just providing more options for the employees, and maybe she can provide those.
How are you today?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have any introductory comments. We're here. Mary took a look at a couple of issues that Mr. Thomas brought up at the last meeting, and I think can walk through those, and then we'll answer any questions the board members may have.
Mary, before we get started, just have one question.
Sure.
I know that you've looked at the options. Real quick,
Yes.
are there any that save us money or and give our employees a better option?
No. It would cost you money and give them a better option, but not save money.
Okay, 'cause I'm going to try to save you some time. Mr. Thomas, you still want to go through those, or?
She was supposed to give options, and I thought the purpose of that was the employee could spend more money and get better coverage. That's all I was looking for, if that was the case. Is that the case, Mayor?
So we did look at an alternate option that would allow employees out-of-pocket exposure to decrease at time of service. So I believe you received a spreadsheet outlining the option C, which towards the bottom of that page highlighted are the areas that would change from what the current benefits are on the POS OA 25250 plan. What we did is we looked at lowering the out-of-pocket maximum from $4,500 to $4,000 for an individual and $9,000 for anybody with dependents to $8,000. In addition to that, we looked at reducing the inpatient facility copay from $350 per day up to $250 per day, as well as any outpatient surgeries from reducing it from $350 to $250. That gets a little bit more in line, and based off of the spend on that page, in order to provide that option to your employees, it would, if claims run as we expect them to, it would be approximately $200,000 that would have to come out of the reserve, which means, we would keep the county contributions flat, as well as the employee contributions flat, but just knowing that we would more than likely be dipping into the reserve that has built up to offset the additional claims exposure. The one caveat to that is our recommendation is to go with this option this year. Next, we need to look at, because the goal isn't to continually deplete the reserve. So at some point in time, we would have to budget for an increase. Even if we had a good plan year, we need to replenish that reserve. So we would have to strongly consider putting in an increase to the employees next year regardless, from a premium perspective.
Unfortunately, you kind of broke up just when you said our recommendation is.
So our recommendation, if you were to go with option C, is because you're tapping into your reserve of about $200,000. And if that is the option that you go with, our recommendation is that next year, regardless if you have a good year or not, you would have to strongly consider increasing premium cost for both the county and the employees to make sure that the reserve doesn't get too far. We don't deplete the reserve too far.
Okay. Well, that was your recommendation if we did that plan. What is staff suggesting? Or is that Mr. Parton?
So the staff recommendation, I guess, Alan, do you want to speak to that, or you want me to speak to that?
Well, I was just going to say that, Mr. Thomas, if we followed option C, it would add and did not pass that cost on to the county or employees. It would add an additional $60,000 to the 140 that we talked about before. And I don't know if Tamika Smith wants to address this more strongly, but I don't believe that is something that we're necessarily comfortable with, tapping the reserve for that increased amount of money. We are comfortable with the 140, but as you begin to get above that, we become uncomfortable with that level of spending into the reserve.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we need a motion regarding the renewal of our medical and dental insurance. Whether we're going to change, go with another option, correct? Look at, or we're going to remain.
Is Mr. Cully, is the motion to keep or
To remain the same, which
to
would,
remain the
which
same?
we'd spend about 140 out of our fund balance that's in our pool money. So it's not fund balance general fund. This is just health insurance pool money
So it's the motion is just to remain the same
for this year.
for this year.
Correct.
Do we need the dollar figure or no?
I don't.
Do we need the dollar figure for what we're going to spend out of the?
I think we've told you what that's going to be.
It's option B.
Option.
One with 139,
I can't
408
hear
out
Mary.
of reserves.
Yeah, it's option B.
You want to make the motion, Nancy?
Which is what we had recommended at the last meeting.
The
Right.
December meeting, right?
Right. Just if you motion to adopt option B, it's got all of the facts with that.
Mr. Chair, I would motion that we continue with option B on our insurance for this year.
There's been a motion to continue with option B for our insurance for the 21-22 year. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, at this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we will do our public comment beginning at 7:30 sharp. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
We'll stand in recess.
Thank you.
convene the January 12th, 2021 Board of Supervisors meeting. We'll move to public comment. Public comment is intended for citizens to provide comments to the board regarding any matter, with the exception of those that are agenda items. You have 3 minutes, and please be prompt. So if anyone would like to come to the podium, please state your name, your voting district, your voting magisterial district, and not your address. And you'll have 3 minutes. Public comment is now open.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of our board, thank you so much for everything. I wanted to add a couple of things before I do my 2-minute 56 presentation. The certificates that you were so kind enough to approve for our Thank You for Serving community, we have what we call shoppers. No one knows who they are. We have 5. They're seniors and regular citizens we are in Mr. Jeff Black's area. So he is our representative. So we're West Caroline. And we just wanted you to know that Domino's fed every single patient and every single caregiver at the polytrauma unit for active duty and veteran soldiers. That's the one thing I wanted to make sure I followed up on. The second thing is for the Thank You for Serving event that we had in September. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We really could not have done it without you. I thank you and Mr. Black for being there. I'm trying to rush. I'm down to 2 minutes and 3 seconds. But thank you so much for your support. Your staff did an excellent job. And finally, this is one of Jakarta's African artifacts. Jakarta stands for Jewel of Celebrated Artistry. We've been 19 years strong. We're a nonprofit 501c3, and we hope that you will consider setting up a meeting so that we can discuss revitalization of the west side of Caroline with a heritage tourism event, and perhaps consider a home for the Jakarta Museum of Jazz and African American History. We have collaborated with the military, high schools, both students and faculty. Mr. Seeley has been at some of our events at Lake Landor. Mr. Thomas, Mr. Black, they have supported us, and we hope that you will give it serious consideration, because the west side of Caroline, there's so much that we can do and we should do. We don't want to eliminate, but we'd like to further enhance the cultural arts with the visual and performing arts in Caroline. So I will be contacting Mr. Cully and Mr. Black and each one of you so that we can set up a meeting and discuss some of our ideas and perhaps plan a budget. Thank you very much. Mr. Cully, I'll be calling your office next week. Thank you.
Thank you for being timely. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment? Please state your name and your voting district.
My name is Brent Hunsinger. I'm with Friends of the Rappahannock. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for having me here tonight. I did not come here to, I came here to speak on an issue that I have discovered that I cannot speak on at this time, so I will be back to speak on that at a later date. But I would, while I'm here, might as well travel all the way down here to give a little bit of an update on the scenic bill to establish Rappahannock River on the Rappahannock River as state scenic, excuse me. That bill will be heard in the next week or so in committee, the House of Delegates. But the one update I would like to give you is that Delegate Orak has become a co-sponsor of that bill, which we are very thankful for. So I would implore you to please call his office and give him thanks for becoming a co-sponsor of that bill. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter?
Sir.
Can you come back to the mic, please?
Yes, sir.
All right. I just got one quick question for you. Do you, are you guys organizing as far as and working with like local governments in the state as far as, because I know I had served on the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, and one of the things that drove me insane is we talk about nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment that's in the Rappahannock, and then you're out, because I fish on the Rappahannock quite often, and then you're on the Rappahannock and you see, I mean, you see trash just floating down.
and it's not uncommon to see bottles and so forth. Do you guys work with local? Are you doing stuff to work with local governments on continuous trash pickups with Spotsylvania and all the areas? Because it is
a major issue.
Yes, and it's just frustrating because we talk about getting and I understand those are stuff that's in the water that needs to come out, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, but we're working on models that we're hoping the data entry is correct, and we talk about riparian buffers and that stuff, but then you have just trash floating down the river, and it's like we're talking about the invisible, but we're not dealing with the visible.
Yes, sir. I can tell you that litter is a major issue in the Rappahannock River and all our rivers in Virginia. One of the things that we have seen in the Rappahannock, and this has been an issue in the last 3 months, is they are working on the 95 bridge and the Chatham Bridge in town, and that we've had a lot of waste coming down. We are finding plastic orange barrels from the river or from the construction on the river. We're finding them in Port Royal. I had a conversation with a gentleman today. So we are working on that issue. We are holding, we do hold lots of cleanups. We have funding to do so. I have actually been in contact with folks about trying to get the side of Route 17 between New Post and.
Could you wrap this up in 30 seconds?
Yes, sir. So we are making lots of efforts. I would be happy to reach out to you all to work more with you on that. But it is a major issue, and we are doing our best to deal with that. As well as at the state level, tomorrow there is a bill to try and ban polystyrene in the state. We'll see where that goes. But so there's efforts on multiple levels to deal with the issue of litter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment? Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment? Hearing none, public comment is now closed. We'll now move on to the public hearing section. Our first public hearing for tonight is a proposed amendment of Chapter 93-1 of the Code of Caroline County to eliminate late payment penalties on water and wastewater customers of Caroline County during the period of March 1, 2020 to January 31st, 2021. And Mr. Cully, are you presenting, or Mr. Shebo, are you there?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Can you hear me? Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
There we go. Okay, wonderful. Your first public hearing tonight is in reference to, at your December 8th meeting, the board adopted an emergency ordinance to waive penalties. As penalties on utility bills have specific requirements for advertising to be able to make sure that we are rates appropriately and giving the public an opportunity to speak, that was not done with the ordinance. The ordinance was adopted to give us the ability to issue the credits back on penalty, to send letters out to all of the customers as it relates to their delinquency and with some municipal utility relief funds that were available. So the board adopted that resolution and the penalties have been credited. County attorney recommended that we hold a public hearing and to codify essentially what you did at your December meeting. So this public hearing is to give the public an opportunity to speak on the waiving of penalties from March 1st of 2020 through January 31st of 2021. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions before you open public comment.
All right. Public comment is now open regarding the proposed amendment of 93-1 Code of Virginia to eliminate the late penalty on water and wastewater customers, Caroline County, during the period of March 1, 2020 to January 31, 2021. Anyone wishing to speak in this matter, come to the mic. Anyone else would like to speak to this matter? Seeing none, how would the board like to handle this matter? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go ahead and close the public comment for item 4 of the public hearing. How would the board like to dispose of this matter?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we move forward with adopting the ordinance amending and reordaining and suspending specific sections of Chapter 93.1, the schedule of fees and levies for public utilities, the Code of Virginia, and waive the reimburse certain fees stated in our packet.
There's a motion. Second, regarding the waiver of fees that's in our board packet. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Mr. Shebo, Mr. Shebo, are you doing public hearing number 5 also?
Yes, sir.
All right. Public hearing is now open for item number 5, proposed exemption from utility disconnect moratorium due to accounts receivable arrangements in excess of 1% of the annual revenue. If there's anyone else like to speak to this matter, Mr. Sheba, you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. The General Assembly during a 2020 special section established specific procedures and requirements for utility services to provide a moratorium on water and sewer disconnections. In addition, it was for any utility, so whether it was gas, electric, or anything else. As part of that, the General Assembly recognized that utilities' sole source of revenue is from the bills that they provide to their customers to be able to operate. As that, they did provide a means for an exemption from the moratorium. And basically what that was a 1% rule is what it was called. We're recommending that the board exercise this 1% rule. The county's finance director performed a written analysis for the 1% test exception. And in that, essentially, our 1% exception would be anything above $29,706. Right now, we were running, at the time that was performed, just over $100,000. So we're well past the 1% exception. A couple things that this will do for us is, one, we don't want to just run out and cut someone off just because they're meeting this. But what this does is this provides us an opportunity to work with our customers. We've already sent letters out to all of our customers that are 30, 60, 90 days delinquent to let them know that there are CARES Act funding available through the Municipal Utility Relief Program. They have to sign an attestation form that why they haven't been able to pay their bill. And once that's done, we can then apply the COVID funding for that. The funding we got will not cover all of the delinquencies, but it will cover probably 80% of our customers. So what this does is allows us, if we don't hear from them from the letters that we've already sent out, we've given them to January 20th as a deadline to respond if they want to apply. Those that have applied will be able to apply that money to that. At that point, we're going to try to call as many customers we can that are still delinquent and try to get them to fill out an attestation so that we can hopefully use the municipal utility relief funds for them. And then if we don't hear from customers, this will give us an opportunity where we'll actually send out disconnection notice for the first time in over 7 months to basically let our customers know that they're on the disconnection list and they need to contact our office. We're hoping that a majority of the customers will contact us as part of our normal operating procedure. And that's going to give us an opportunity to, again, talk to them about the Municipal Utility Relief Program, get them to apply for funds if they haven't, work out flexible payment plans with them. As part of this regulation, we are required to provide up to 24 months of a payment plan. So it's really up to the individual of how many months they want to choose. If they want to choose 6, 12, or up to 24 months, we'll work with them and try to get them to, one, apply as much funds as we can. The board's just issued with your final approval from the previous public hearing, $48,000 in penalties were given back to the customers. That took a lot of customers off of the 30, 60, 90. We still have about 300 customers that still are above 30, 60, 90 days. So we think with adding the municipal utility relief funds on top of the penalty waiving. We're going to get our customers back where they can actually have a manageable payment plan. We're concerned if we continue for the next 4 to 6 months and these bills continue to add up and get higher than where we are today, that it's going to be really hard for our customers to pay back. So this would just give us a tool to be able to send out those disconnection notices and then eventually do a disconnection so that we can actually talk to them if they have not responded in any other means so that we can work out payment plans with them. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shebel. Board members have any questions for Mr. Shebel? I said, I do think this is a good opportunity for us to really connect with our community and show that we do care about our community and to do all that we can to make sure we give them every option possible to catch up and be part of our utility program.
Make sure you go to public.
What's that?
Make sure you go to public.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Oh, yeah. We'll now open the public comment. Does anyone like to speak about this matter? Does anyone like to speak about this matter? Hearing none, I'll close public comment. Board members, how do you wish to proceed?
I don't know if I have it or not. I'm looking at where the.
Mr. Chair, I move that we proceed to adopt the proposed exercise exception from utility disconnection memorandum as presented in our board packet under, or the resolution, I'm sorry, verifying and approving utility accounts receivable and arrears as in excess of 1% of annual operating revenues.
There's a motion to adopt the 1% resolution regarding utility disconnect memorandum that's found in your package. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and properly second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. That concludes our public comment for tonight. We'll move on to new business. Item number 7 on the agenda is the first reading of text amendment 24-2020 and continued first reading of text amendment 13-2020 through text amendment -17 through 17-20 indoor outdoor commercial kennel. Mr. Fincham.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, your first set of text amendments tonight, subject to first reading, are TXT 13 through 17, 2020, and TXT 24-2020. Collectively, these sets of amendments would establish indoor kennels as a permitted use in the B1 and M1 zoning districts, while keeping outdoor facilities as a special exception use in those districts. The first sets of regulations were actually forwarded to the board by the Planning Commission back in November, while we were still working on the standards for those amendments. The board deferred action and continued the first reading to tonight in order to allow those standards or recommended standards to catch up with the rest of the text amendments. So collectively, the amendments would clarify what's an indoor kennel versus an outdoor kennel. It would allow the indoor kennels by right in B1 and M1, and the outdoor kennels by special exception, which you can, as you know, apply standards to. And then it creates the general standards for the by right uses. And with that, I'll address any questions that the board may have.
Board members have any questions regarding these text amendments 13 through 20? I'm sorry, 13 through 17.
This is just to forward it to a public hearing.
Yes, ma'am. And actually, I would remind the board that back at your December meeting, you went ahead and authorized a public hearing at your January 26th meeting for these.
Okay. I do have a question. Yes. So, yeah.
No, yeah, it's okay.
That's right. Why do we have under section 13-2020, definition of a commercial kennel includes breeding, boarding, training, and selling. I foresee puppy, I had this vision of puppy mills in my head. Can we strike through breeding?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. If board so decides to, but that was my flash when I saw that.
And we actually thought of that as well, and thought that tonight that might get brought up, so.
And since I've got the mic for a minute, my other thing is on the next page under the percentages of floor use, there's veterinary services. Do we really want a kennel competing against our actual veterinary clinic hospitals? I mean, that's a real small percentage, but why is a kennel being a veterinarian at the same time?
Yeah, I don't think it was designed to compete with veterinarian clinics. I think it was intended to provide clarification that there's an opportunity on a small scale for vet services to be provided as an ancillary use to the indoor kennels. So it's really not designed to be a major or principal use. It was designed to be a small percentage or accessory to the overall use. But certainly we can eliminate that if that's a concern.
I'll think about that one.
Is that it, Ms. Long? Any other board comments, Mr. Seeley?
I noticed that we have a minimum lot area of 1 acre, but we don't have the building footprint minimum.
That's correct, Mr. Seal. I think that would depend on the size of.
And let me just give you my example.
Right.
You build a 800 square foot building, office space or kennel space. You can have up to 20. And then your floor space that you actually have to cover is what, 30%. I mean, is there a proportion to the building size, to the actual kennel size, other than the floor space by percentage? Is there a way, I was mathematically seeing if I could get around this.
There is no percentage of your recreation area to the main building, okay? If you had indoors room for, say, 20 kennels or 20 runs indoors, okay? We didn't feel comfortable trying to create a minimum building size because you're going to have a number of uses. You're going to have restrooms. You're going to have, if you've got a small retail area.
Okay, I was just looking for the numerical sort of, how do I get there from here?
Right.
I guess we can ask that of any applicant when they come.
Yeah, I think we were trying to keep it at a minimum.
Okay.
And not try to create a maximum. At a minimum, you've got to have an acre of land. You've got to meet your required setbacks for that building. If you have an outdoor recreation space, that's got to be to the rear of the structure, outside of any required setbacks. Your parking is going to be based upon the square footage of the building. So I think we were comfortable saying at a minimum, you have to have an acre. If you actually had a larger facility, it's going to have to be scaled up appropriately.
Okay, just
Yeah, right.
looking at the numbers on that.
Mr. Finch.
Mr. Go
If this is a tenant space amongst several tenant spaces, is the 1 acre requirement for the building that might house other tenants, or is it, how did that situation come into play with that?
I think we really envisioned this would end up being a freestanding structure. I'm not sure that use fit neatly into a shopping center, for example.
I was thinking more of like the building down Commerce Drive that where Evans Heating and Air is located, where there is some sort of animal facility there presently.
Yeah, this specific use would have to have an acre of land associated with it at a minimum.
Okay.
Okay, so if somebody came in and said, okay, I have this space, as you referenced, while it's not envisioned that it would fit in like a shopping center or a strip center, to the extent that somebody wanted to try to do that, then I think these minimum standards would apply, and they would have to have an acre of land and be able to calculate that they can meet all the requirements for that facility.
All right.
Any other comments regarding
Just one.
Mr. Black?
Have we been in contact with the business regarding this?
It's actually been a couple of months since we discussed this with them, but I will reach back out to him.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments?
I have a couple of other thoughts, but I'm not ready to comment on them yet, so I'll talk to Mr. Fitchum later.
If the board's comfortable, then we'll go ahead and continue with the public hearing scheduled for the 26th on these items.
Is that the wishes of the board to go ahead to public hearing for the 26th for these text amendments? Pardon?
And I can get with you, Ms. Long.
Yeah, I don't think you need a motion. I think it's already scheduled.
Right. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this one may take a little bit longer. You have before you tonight in TXT 18, 19, 20, and 21, collectively the proposed amendments recommended to the board, excuse me, from the Planning Commission related to solar energy projects or commercial solar energy projects in Caroline County. Briefly, if you remember several years ago, we actually worked on a set of amendments for projects that were 20 megawatts or less. That whole process kind of died at the board. The applicant wasn't ready to go forward with the projects. Last summer, those projects indicated to staff that they were ready to go forward. We had a couple of other larger projects that were starting to look at the county, and we still didn't have any regulations that potentially allowed that type of facility. So the board referred everything back to the Planning Commission. These four amendments are collectively are the work done by the Planning Commission to look or attempt to look at solar, commercial solar projects completely. So we've developed regulations that look at projects at 20 megawatts or less, and projects that are greater than 20 megawatts up to a cap of 150 megawatts in the form of the Solar Energy Overlay District. The in looking at the solar energy development in the Commonwealth, solar energy is being driven by the Commonwealth of Virginia's energy plan. There have been a number of bills introduced in the last couple of years that focus on renewable energy sources with less dependence on fossil fuels. And it's basically creating the opportunity for significant expansion of solar projects in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And many of those projects are going to be in rural areas that have large tracts of land or assemblages of large tracts of land, which I think is why the board felt it was important to come back and comprehensively look at solar energy in the county. I gave you a fairly detailed introduction, tried to explain the thought process behind the crafting of the regulations as they were presented to the board. And with that, unless the board wants additional overview, I would be more than willing to address any specific questions concerning the regulations that you may have. This is your first chance to look at this. It's a fairly large set of regulations. We've tried to be as all-encompassing as possible. And I would expect that you will have a lot of questions and will perhaps want to take some additional time to look at these regs and discuss them.
Yeah, I think we do need time. I'm going to let the board ask questions, but we'll talk about bringing this back once we've had a chance to digest it.
Okay.
Mr. Black?
I heard Mr. Seeley say this before the meeting, and Mr. Underwood agreed. I think that the Planning Commission did a really good job with this to start with. I think we got a good base here. My question is with you, is this pretty consistent with other, because this is getting big in Virginia. It's becoming very, very, and it's one of the issues is it's the wave of the future, but it's still a NIMBY issue. It's still not in my backyard. And are we doing a lot of comparison notes to other localities and where we've had success stories? Because even in Charlottesville, like I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, even some of the members of the Albemarle Board of Supervisors, they, which is funny because but some of them have major opposition to some of these things too. So I was just kind of wondering if we were looking at success stories when we put these things together.
Yes, sir. We've looked at regulations from other localities. We've looked at tried to look at projects that have been successful. You're correct. There's a lot of not in my backyard when it comes to these projects. I will tell you, I think the regulations as they are crafted are somewhat unique in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the one we've recommended the creation of the overlay district for the larger projects, those projects that are greater than 20 megawatts, which the commission recommended we cap at 150 megawatts. That's not something that a practice that I think we've seen elsewhere in Virginia. And there was a rationale behind that in terms of the size of the projects and trying to keep those projects in close proximity to the power lines that these projects could tie into. So I think we've got a lot of good guidance from other ordinances that are out there. I think the commission and took it a step further in differentiating between projects that are 20 megawatts or less and then the larger projects. That's something we haven't seen.
Could you possibly get us, because I know you see in the news, like one of the ones that's been always in the news lately is the Spotsylvania one. I mean, the Spotsylvania one is massive, and just for a layperson, could you basically give us a chart sometimes about some of the projects that have come in to different localities so we can look at it?
Yes, sir.
Along with their size, like for example, you know, what exactly when you say 20 megawatts, what is that producing? Where's that electricity going? Those would be things to help us understand too exactly what we're talking about for acreage. The amount of acreage that's needed for like a 20 megawatt project versus 30, because we're not, none of us up here are electric, solar experts by any stretch of the imagination. So just to kind of have a little background history on some of the projects that already take place, I think that would be really important for me to look at as well.
Yes, sir. What I can assure you is the largest project in Caroline under these regulations is about 1/10 of the size of the project in Spotsylvania County. And it will still be big. It would still be big.
Right. And there's been some concerns there too, so.
Yes.
Mr. Vincent, my concern always is the impact upon a district or citizens in a district. We have a tendency sometimes to impact certain people differently than we would other people. So I want to make sure, take a look at that to make sure we're not impacting one set of folks differently than we would and see it a different way than other. Like he said, not in my backyard, but maybe sometimes not in my district. So I want to make sure we're on an even playing field and we're looking at it. That impacts someone else, it's okay. But I think we need to make sure we're not impacting one group or subset of folks.
Would it be beneficial to the board? You have the overlay district map. You have the smaller version that was in your packet. I handed out a larger version before the meeting tonight so that you didn't have to strain your eyes looking at all the lines on the map. So would it be beneficial for us to also overlay the election district boundaries just so that you could see that in comparison to the overlay district?
I would like to see it.
We can certainly do that for you.
Just to make sure.
As an example.
And how is this, like the other thing too, is does this align with our comprehensive plan as far as, because like the growth areas, like if we have, because I know, for example, like in my district, there's Childsburg is located as like a growth area in the comprehensive plan. Like, and so I'm thinking to myself, as, I'd like to see that. That becomes, is this in line with that plan?
If you look at the overlay district map, we have identified the growth areas in the county. And you will see that we also created a half-mile buffer around those growth areas, okay? That was done in recognition of the importance of the growth areas in our planning process. That, the board has spent a great deal of time and a great deal of money investing in utility infrastructure to make the growth areas work. And one of our concerns was the potential for a land use such as a large solar facility to have an adverse impact on those growth areas. So that's why you see on that map the growth areas, the buffers around the growth areas, and a standard that at least on first cut, you can't be within a half-mile of a growth area of one of these facilities. If a facility, by chance, a portion of the property was within a growth area boundary or a half-mile, then they would specifically have to come to the board and with a special exception permit so that you could look at that issue in greater detail and make an informed decision about whether you should allow that encroachment or not. Conversely, there may be situations where the board thinks that, yes, we have a growth area boundary here, but for one reason or another, this use over the next 25 to 30 years may not be such a bad thing. For example, some of our growth areas have utility and development phasing plans where we try to project out 10, 15, 25 years where the utility extensions are going to be and where development will occur. This might actually be a decent interim land use for some of those development areas that are further out in the phasing plan, so that you don't have premature development of some other type of land use that could also adversely affect the future of those growth areas. So it allows you to look at it from both sides.
Thank you. Mr. Fincham, there have been Chamber of Commerce Q&As from a particular solar firm. Would it be appropriate for the board to at least listen to a presentation from one or many firms so we can get an idea of what these projects really are?
I think that's really what the zoning process is for, but I would defer to the county attorney as to, whether the board as a whole should be listening to presentations at this time. And basically, arguably, that's a zoning meeting.
Right, okay, yeah. If you put it like that, I just thought more of an informational, this is what our particular solar thing is, but that may be the case, so.
Mr. Thomas, this is Chris McKenzie here. Filling in on the back half of the meeting for Mr. Emerson. I based on my experience with the Planning Commission, we can certainly expect the firms that want a project to make a presentation even during public hearing on this zoning amendment. So I think that they'd have the opportunity to speak during that public hearing process. And also at Planning Commission, and Mr. Fincham might be able to expand upon this, there was a non-affiliated individual from UVA who gave a speech about solar projects generally. And that might be a source of information that isn't affiliated with any particular commercial applicant.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking, and that may be the better thing. It's really just to give the board a better understanding of what solar is and how it works, because I know we've got some old ideas about problems, and there are a lot of new things. So that was the only thing.
And another thing we can offer, myself and Vivian Giles from our office gave a presentation to the Planning Commission regarding some of the legal aspects of these projects, and in particular, some of the new laws that came out of the General Assembly last year, just to give them a framework for analyzing these amendments. And we'd be happy to do that for the board if you'd like.
I have a couple. Mr. Fincham, Mr. Seeley has a couple questions, then I have a couple comments.
I'm going to work backwards in your in the actual ordinance that we have. So if you look at page 13, decommissioning number 5, and I'm working backwards for a reason. So let me just start here.
Give me a heads up when you want the specific answer so I can give you the specific answer.
I will. I noticed that the county is allowing an estimated decommissioning cost with the salvage price being incorporated in that decommissioning cost. First of all, am I reading that correctly?
If there is a salvage cost, yes. And part of this guidance comes from language in the state code.
Because salvage cost today is not salvage cost 15 years from now. I noticed that you say if there's a glut, yada, yada. But the salvage cost, and I'm going to go backwards to page 10, and I'm going to start with signage on number 5 on the bottom of page 10.
Jeff, before you leave 13,
Yeah, go ahead.
there's a bond that goes with that.
There's a bond, but they get to deduct the salvage cost from their bond, is how I read this.
That is correct. In calculating, in calculating the decommissioning cost of a project, by law, they are allowed to determine a salvage value for products. I think you're correct. Salvage value now, trying to calculate a salvage value 30 years from now, two different issues.
Because some of this material disappears over time. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with some of the materials that are being used, and they're not there at the end of the life.
But doesn't that protect us more? Because the salvage value today is going to be a lot higher than the salvage value 30 years from now.
Well, the salvage, the
Not
material
necessarily.
is gone.
I'm not sure, because
But if things disappear, by logic, if it's gone, it's going to be worth less, right?
true. I think the other aspect of what's the actual value, for example, of a solar panel now?
Right.
Is there really much salvage value to the materials in that solar panel? May not be so much so now. 30 years from now, that calculation may be entirely different in terms of how they can pull the materials out and recycle the product or component products of that panel. So I think we have to look at the salvage value of the materials as that salvage value currently exists. And every 5 years, they give us a new update.
Well, maybe, yeah, and that's really, we don't have to belabor the point.
No, I'm just drawing a line. I just want to make sure I understand, because it was interesting that the salvage value gets deducted from their bond, which I just thought
that is correct.
That's really because some things turn from one thing to another over time, and they weren't in there when you started, but they're in there when you're done, and nobody wants them.
But it's kind of, well, yeah, that's another story, but it's kind of like technology. The solar panels from 30 years ago are worth little or nothing now, and the solar panels now, as technology improves, will be lower. So we could probably fix this by a greater than or equal to.
Well, I just point out some things that I think we just need to pay attention to, and these are
okay.
Mm-hmm.
The language that's tied to depreciation or amortization of equipment, or, I mean, that's basically what we're talking about. The value over time is, because, I mean, who's going to determine the value and what's the fair market, and how do you do that unless you have a schedule that they agree to, or, I mean, we're just pulling things out of the sky right now, but
Mr. Inwood,
Well,
isn't it every 5 years they have to redo it?
yes, and let me go to a sentence in number 5, Mr. Seeley, about halfway through. It says the reclamation salvage value of the materials shall be based upon the current salvage market for the component materials. So when they prepare
number 5,
the estimate, it's based upon the salvage market at the time. So we got a bond estimate tomorrow for a project, and as part of developing that bond estimate, the applicant submitted a salvage value. It would have to be based upon the value at the time it is submitted to the county. And then that gets updated every 5 years on that same.
Let me go backwards a little further. I started there for a reason, okay? Number 5 on page 10. And this is signage.
Yes, sir.
And it says, signage is prohibited on solar equipment except as follows. And it lays out the various things on here, so they're not really identifiable. So I have an article from a hurricane that came through and took out a bunch of solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
They're not mine because there's no markings on those solar panels to identify where they came from. And we actually listed this in the ordinance. So we have to be able to, if it leaves the facility whole or in pieces, you're going to have to be able to identify where it came from. And, you know, tornadoes, and that takes me back up to number 2 on page 10, still at the very top. Could we add natural disasters in here for inspection in the event of, because we don't have that. We wouldn't have any reason to go look necessarily or be able to go look because it's not in the ordinance.
Yes, sir. We could do that. And we can add the manufacturer's information as part of
I just
something.
want us to be able to make sure we know if it leaves. Because some of these can end up in somebody's pond. If you end up with 10 or 15 or 20 of these in somebody's pond, which we've got a plethora of around the county, and somebody fishes one out 2 years later, I mean, you won't know where these things go. I mean, the tornado came through Bowling Green. I ended up with an entire roof in pieces no bigger than 2 by 2 all across the front and backyard. Shingles, plywood, nails, the whole 9 yards. And that structure started out probably half a mile or more from my house.
Yeah, we can add that. Actually, if you look at the signage, the intent was kind of the opposite. It was so that they, you know, didn't become billboards.
No, I'm just looking at this was on the solar signage is on
Right.
the solar equipment.
Yeah.
I'm looking for identification.
Yeah, we can do that.
Under 223.8, number 3, can somebody build a project on speculation of sale of electricity?
The short answer is yes. A commercial builder may not necessarily know who the end user is going to be when they start the project. So there potentially can be some speculation there. Now, conversely,
I'm going, but go. I think you're going to go where I'm going.
maybe not, but conversely, with the Virginia Energy Plan and the need for Dominion and the other utility generators and to convert from coal-fired or fossil fuel facilities to these renewables, the majority of electricity generated by these facilities is going to end up being purchased by the power companies.
But here's the question. If somebody comes in and buys up 5 20-megawatt tracks and they don't put anything on them, does it deduct?
Nope, there's still a time limit.
I saw the time limit, 3 years. I'm well aware. But so once we reach saturation, what we're considering saturation, do those facilities count since they don't have quote unquote solar panels on them?
Yes.
Your
approval is based upon a project of X size.
Okay.
And
so
cumulatively, we will keep track of that until we reach that cap of either 100 megawatts for your projects that are 20 megawatts or less, or 600 megawatts for your larger projects. So cumulatively between the two, this would cap solar generation, commercial solar generation at 700 megawatts throughout the entire county.
And I haven't done the conversion, but I saw 600 kilovolt or less lines for a 20 megawatt project, and I didn't have time to do I'd have to go get a book out to do that, and I just didn't have the energy to do that.
When we actually did the ordinance, we didn't specify the exact capacity of all the lines because some of our power companies don't want that information out there.
I understand.
So we use the 69 kilovolt figure to which is a good number to separate the lower size lines from the larger lines.
Okay, and the one last is, could we actually make megawatts? Can we actually fix and make sure it's all capital M?
Yeah, I'll fix it.
So there'll be things that's milliwatts, because I was like, milliwatts? Why are we talking about 150 milliwatts?
I tried, Mr. Seeley.
I understand.
I
just don't. But I've got some other stuff. But Mr. Underwood, I will go see Mr. Fincham on the rest of these. But those are my, at least ordinance-wise, are my high points.
Okay.
I think the board can agree that because of the verboseness of this material, we're gonna need some time to digest it and possibly do a work session. I think maybe between now and the first meeting in March would be my.
Yeah, we're gonna have to probably couple this with something.
Yeah.
Can we couple this with the internet? We do that, couple this with like discussion of broadband in the county? No, I mean, just in general, like, I mean, for the future, how we see for the expansion.
All right, Mr. Black suggested that we just put it together and have a discussion about this and the internet. I think this is going to be pretty.
This is gonna, if you have the attorneys come and talk about all this in general, this is gonna be a long meeting. Yeah. Really long.
Well, unless we want to do separate work sessions for each one.
Well, we need to talk about a work session schedule then.
Yep, okay.
Can we look at our calendars and we have 2 meetings in March. So we look at our calendar for a meeting and maybe we have one meeting in February then.
Remember, we're gonna have meetings with the school starting up soon.
Right, but we're gonna have to get this done though.
Right.
Well, so. I mean, there's only so many hours and so many days in a week. We're gonna have to, look at our calendars to determine. I thought about the months that we have one meeting would probably be a good opportunity to schedule another meeting in one of those dates. So we have one in January and one in,
we have 2 in January.
I mean, one in February, excuse me. And then we have, one in April.
If you look at the calendar, we've already got something scheduled for this. I mean, look at the very last page.
Oh, not January, not this month. Yeah, we're just talking about, that's February. We have the joint school board meeting on the 23rd of February.
Yeah, normally we don't have a whole lot of spare meetings time until after we finish with the budget.
Right.
As far as a secondary, the fourth Tuesday.
Well, how urgent do we want to try to tackle this? It's going to take some time. Mr. Fincham, you have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would advise is that we are aware of a number of applicants who are interested in the counties, in the progress of these regulations.
So you're saying don't drag our feet?
I'm saying I don't vote, so it's entirely up to you all.
Do we want to consider February 9th, Mr. Chair?
That's a board meeting.
Well, just to do it before, like we do with the school? No?
You're gonna need some time.
All right.
We could do the first week in February. I mean, look at like the second.
First Tuesday?
First Tuesday.
February 2nd. You want to look at our calendars?
School board. School board.
23rd, we already have a meeting scheduled
With the school board on February 23rd. Is there any conflict with February 2nd?
When's the, or Tuesday? Okay, yeah, I would be okay with the,
Is it Groundhog? Over and over again.
all right, so what are we looking at? We have a board meeting on the 26th.
Thank you.
Any recommendations from the board?
The only thing I see is the second. I mean,
February 2nd for work session.
Is there any issue with February 2nd work session with the calendar? Mr. Forehand?
I'm good. Right now, I'm good.
I'll be out that night.
You'll be out?
My oldest becomes a teenager that night.
What about the 3rd?
It's fine with me.
Because Tuesday or
Is it
Wednesday.
nothing?
Good, good. The 3rd's good.
Third's good?
Third's good.
Mr. Thomas? No. All right, Mr. Finch, can we tentatively plan for February 3rd work session?
Yes, sir. And I will get with Mr. Seeley, and if anybody else has any additional questions, I will reach out to you. And
Mr. Finch, my only request is that when we're looking at the map, that we give the audience an opportunity, if we could have it up, so if there's any question about the map.
sure, we can
I'd
do
like
that.
for them to be able to see the map and what we're discussing in terms of area.
Yes, sir.
Any other board members? 3rd it is. Thank you, Mr. Finch. Well, then we'll move this to February 3rd.
Okay.
Item number 9 on the agenda, text amendment, first reading of text amendment 22-2020, exemption for height regulation requirements.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you recall, this item was also discussed at your December meeting. This was an ordinance amendment to clarify the exceptions to the height regulations in the county to ensure that those regulations apply to principal structures and not to accessory structures or uses. That item, public hearing was held by the Planning Commission, and they forwarded this to the board with a recommendation of approval. And unless the board directs otherwise, the December recommendation was to have a public hearing at your January 26th meeting. And that also applies to the next item as well.
Mr. Finch, what's driving this?
Pardon?
What's driving this change?
We need to clarify the ordinance, and really that's what it is. It's a clarification between the principal and accessory uses.
And sorry, one last minor question. What is a belfries?
Pardon?
What is a belfries?
Belfry? It's a tower. We struck out cupola. We could have left cupola and struck belfry. They're really the little accessory towers that you put like up in a church or other similar types of uses.
The Widow's Watch. There was a coastal home.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So they're actually integral to the structure itself. So that's why we left one of those in there. It applies to all of them.
Any other questions for Mr. Fincham on item number 9?
Item number 10.
Any question?
But your mic's not on.
Item number 10, Mr. Fincham.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next item that was also forwarded to the board with a recommendation of approval was an amendment to the Highway Corridor Overlay District regulations. As the board will remember, a number of your major primary and secondary roads in the county, you've established a Highway Corridor Overlay District to facilitate the type of development and the design landscaping standards for development. One of the glaring omissions is actually Interstate 95. We have our growth areas and we had the potential for development to back up to Interstate 95. And in a lot of cases, that development could be the perhaps less desirable side of the development. And in keeping with the idea of promoting an attractive image to the corridors in the county, the commission recommended the establishment of a 50-foot buffer along the from the Interstate 95 property line to create an aesthetic buffer for any development that would back up to the 95 corridor.
Any questions for Mr. Fincham regarding item number 10 regarding the revisions for the highway corridor overlay?
Is that set for public hearing also?
Yes, sir.
26, I believe. All right, this is set for a public hearing for January 26th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Fincham, you're doing item number 11 also. Any board comments regarding?
I am leaving the podium after item 11, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fincham.
Item 11 is actually a cleanup set of regulations. If the board will recall that we've adopted regulations for cell towers and other communication towers that require special exception permits. Those standards date to the early 2000s, and they've been amended a number of times over the years. Recently, however, the federal government and the Commonwealth of Virginia have stepped in to remove or reduce some of the authority that local governments have when it comes to approving these telecommunications towers. So Mr. McKenzie took our ordinance, compared it to the federal and state regulations, and cleaned up our tower ordinance to ensure its consistency with applicable federal and state law. For example, some of the things that we can't require anymore is for a tower company to provide access to the county for our communications needs. We used to be able to reserve space on a tower. We can't do that anymore. This really is a cleanup item to bring us into conformance with current communications law, telecommunications law. And the Planning Commission also forwarded this to the board with a recommendation of approval.
Board members have comments regarding item number 11? So that is set for what, as well as for the
Yes, sir.
26th. Any comments, any board members? The pension, that's all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 12 on the agenda is proposed supplemental pay for sworn sheriff's office personnel to match the state supplement. I believe 20 of the sheriff's personnel not included in the funds that we appropriated for.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a motion to approve this? I think it's, something
Second.
that we all agree with.
Second.
Motion has been approved and properly second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Scully. Great job.
Wonderful. By the time I got the podium cleaned off, y'all approved it, so wonderful. that is correct. We've included the update on the capital projects. That's not a lot of change on those since the last report. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to try to answer those. Wow. I lean over, I'm rubbing my head on the microphone. And then we've got the calendar. Remember, the important thing, 5 p.m., we have a joint meeting with the school board on the 26th. So we will recess out of this meeting to a 5 o'clock meeting just to cover our bases there. We've got I think it's a virtual day. Don't go to Richmond, but on the 28th, we just need to let Pam know if you want to attend the VACO VML legislative virtual day with the General Assembly. She's probably got some sign up to do. We've just added a meeting, which we'll recess out of our meeting on the 26th to the 3rd for your work session on solar regulations, our regular meeting on the 9th. And then our joint meeting with the school board on the 23rd. As far as I know, that's on our calendar. I would think that the schools will confirm that prior to that time frame, but we're holding that date open for them. Don't forget, Monday the 18th is Martin Luther King Day. There's a state holiday, county offices closed, as well as in February, President's Day, the 15th.
Jimmy, quick question for Mr. Combs.
Yes, sir, Mr. Thomas.
We're back to the capital projects, the Carmel Church Station. That the 13,000 was just for the actual.
That was for that
purchase.
Well, some of that might be, but I think we did soils work there. That might be a Mr. Schiebel question, but we've spent some money there evaluating the site.
I thought that was the next thing, and then we were supposed to move forward after the soils. Is that it?
We also did we also surveyed the property to identify the 3.1 acres. Did some survey work related to the entrance location. So that's probably the majority of what that cost is.
Okay, so the next step is?
Next step is to execute the agreement and get on site and finish the detailed analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
We also did an environmental phase 1 as part of that expenditure.
If you didn't hear, environmental phase 1.
Is that what he said?
Environmental phase 1, yes.
And I take it we passed that, Mr. Schiebel?
We did.
Yes, we did.
Okay. What's your site look like? You got it?
We're working on that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. We do not have a closed meeting, so closing board comments. Mr. Forehand.
None, sir.
None. Mr. Black.
None.
Mr. Sealing.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Long.
I have none.
Mr. Thomas.
I do have one just a reminder. Mr. Black is on the VACO board. I take it you're going to be on the virtual meeting for legislators?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I intended to be on that too, but I just want to make sure in case I get hit by a bus. My point of being on there was to see if we could get our state legislators to include transportation costs as part of the comprehensive index.
Okay.
So if we can ask them that, that'll equalize us with some other localities, because our budget's the same as Fredericksburg, but the net is about $6 million less because we got more transportation costs.
Right. And yeah, Fredericksburg, I've had that discussed. Fredericksburg would argue they don't get nearly the state money, but yes.
Our budgets are almost exactly the same. I've done the analysis before.
Yeah, I know.
But we've got a lot more money in transportation.
Yep.
So that's the one point I hope we can make our legislators aware of.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I do have one comment before we adjourn. We have our broadband committee, and I'd like us to have a discussion about pulling that committee together. And I think the citizens would appreciate the conversation that they're having. And most of those meetings I think we need to, if we could formalize that committee to make it to where they could have a meeting and they could present the ideas so that we can hear because many citizens are asking about what are we doing about broadband internet? And This way they would be able to hear and see what's going on in that meeting.
Is it a conference call meeting?
I believe so
Or
right
Zoom
now.
meeting?
Mr.
They've all been Zoom so lately.
All right, we'll have to talk to tech and see what we.
And make use of the talent that's on that committee. So I'm sure you'd appreciate it. So I wish the board would just think about it. Maybe we can have a discussion at our next meeting. Yep, can work best without. Yep. And my final comment is I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to sit in this chair. I still kind of have some angst about it, but I will do the absolute best I can. Any other comments? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn. Motion.
Oh, we got recess. I make a motion, we recess to 5 o'clock on the 26th at the, is it going to be in the EOC?
5 o'clock, yeah.
Where will it be?
Yeah.
Just, okay, it's Community Services Building. 5 o'clock, Community Services Building on the 26th.
Motion to recess until January 26th, 5 o'clock, for our joint session meeting with the school boards. Been properly moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned, or recess.
Recess.